Dear listeners, a new day and a new story to discuss. Today, I'm going to tell you a story that interests me. Listen and write down what you think about this situation. I'm interested in your opinions. I remember that day like it was just yesterday, the clock's hands crawling slowly as I sat in my usual spot in the surveillance room of the city's largest supermarket. My job, a blend of tedium and vigilance, involved watching the comings and goings of shoppers through a mosaic of screens. The room, dimly lit and cramped, was my fortress, my realm of observation. The monotony of my job often left me lost in thought, but there was one aspect that always piqued my interest: secretly watching my wife, Liz. She never knew, and I never planned to tell her. It was my little secret, a harmless indulgence in an otherwise mundane routine. Liz walked among the aisles with a grace that always captivated me. I watched her from my hidden perch, admiring the way she paused to examine products, her brow furrowing in concentration. I often wondered what went through her mind during these solitary moments. My colleagues, Mike and Tom, provided occasional reprieves from the solitude. Mike, around my age, was a seasoned worker, his face etched with lines of experience. Tom, the younger one, was always brimming with energy, a stark contrast to the rest of us. "Hey, watch this guy," Tom nudged me one day, pointing to a screen where a shifty man lingered suspiciously near the electronics section. Our job wasn't just observing. We were guardians in our own right, safeguarding the store's assets from petty thieves. "Looks like we've got a live one," Mike commented, his eyes not leaving the screen. We watched as the man awkwardly shoved a small electronic device into his coat. I reached for the radio, ready to alert security, but my attention was diverted. There she was, Liz, in aisle 5, her hair cascading down her shoulders, a list in hand. For a moment, I forgot about the thief, my eyes solely on her. It was then that I heard the scuffle through the radio. Security had apprehended the man. A small victory in our daily routine. "You okay, man? You zoned out for a sec," Tom asked, glancing at me with a hint of concern. "Yeah, just thinking," I replied, not wanting to divulge my secret pastime. The day rolled on, and as the clock neared the end of my shift, a plan formed in my mind. Today, I decided, I would surprise Liz. Maybe a nice dinner, something to break the monotony of our daily lives. The thought alone brought a smile to my face. I purchased a bouquet of flowers on my way home, imagining Liz's surprise and delight. But as I opened the door to our house, something felt off. The kids, Jason and Mark, were there, their eyes glued to the TV screen, but Liz was nowhere to be seen. "Dad, you're early," Jason, the elder of the two, exclaimed without taking his eyes off the screen. "Where's your mom?" I asked, setting the flowers down. "She hasn't come home yet," Mark replied, his attention equally divided between the TV and me. A knot formed in my stomach. This wasn't like Liz. She should have been home by now. Concern etched on my face. I dialed her number, each ring amplifying my worry. When she finally answered, her voice was light, almost airy. "Hey, love, where are you?" I asked, trying to mask the concern in my voice. "Oh, just at Sarah's." Lost track of time, she replied casually. Sarah, her friend from work. It wasn't unusual for Liz to visit her, but something in her tone didn't sit right with me. "I'll be home soon. Don't wait up for dinner," she added before ending the call abruptly. I stood there, phone in hand, a myriad of questions swirling in my mind. Was everything all right? Why did her voice sound so distant? The unease refused to settle, and I found myself pacing the living room, the bouquet of flowers now a forgotten gesture. As the evening wore on, my mind raced with possibilities. Our life, though mostly serene, had its share of ups and downs. But nothing had prepared me for the gnawing feeling of uncertainty that now gripped me. Little did I know, this was just the beginning of a series of events that would turn my world upside down, challenging the very foundations of my trust and love. The secret observer, once content in his role, was about to be thrust into a whirlwind of doubt and revelation. The next day dawned just like any other, but with an undercurrent of unease that I couldn't shake off. I headed to work, my mind still replaying Liz's distant voice and abrupt end to our conversation the night before. The day at the supermarket surveillance room was mundane, the usual dance of shoppers and occasional petty thieves parading across my screens. Mid-morning, I caught sight of Liz entering the store. My heart skipped a beat. Something about her seemed different today. She moved with a purpose, her steps more deliberate than usual. My eyes followed her every move, curious and apprehensive. "Hey, look sharp." Tom's voice jolted me back to reality. He pointed at a screen where a teenager was clumsily attempting to pocket a candy bar. I sighed and radioed in the security, my attention divided. As I glanced back to Liz's screen, I saw her picking up items she never usually bought. A bottle of our favorite wine, a selection of exotic fruits, and some gourmet chocolates. My mind raced with possibilities. Was she planning something special? A surprise dinner, perhaps? The thought momentarily lifted my spirits. Maybe I had been overthinking things last night. Maybe everything was fine between us. Man, you seem distracted today. Everything okay at home? Mike asked, his seasoned eyes picking up on my unsettled demeanor. Yeah, just wondering about something, I replied, not wanting to delve into my personal concerns. The day trudged on, and my anticipation for the evening grew. I imagined walking into a house filled with the aroma of Liz's cooking, the table set for a romantic dinner. My heart warmed at the thought. Finally, the clock signaled the end of my shift. I practically bolted out of the room, eager to get home. On my way, I stopped by a florist, picking out a bouquet of red roses, Liz's favorite. The drive home felt longer than usual, my mind abuzz with excitement and a hint of anxiety. What if I was wrong? What if there was no special dinner? I arrived home to find it unusually quiet. The kids were at a friend's house, and Liz's car wasn't in the driveway. My heart sank. Where was she? The house, devoid of any signs of a planned dinner, felt cold and unwelcoming. I paced around, trying to quell the rising tide of disappointment and worry. Then, my phone buzzed, a message from Liz, running late, start without me. Confusion and frustration swirled within me. This wasn't like Liz. She was meticulous about plans, especially something as special as this seemed to be. The evening dragged on, each passing minute stretching longer than the last. I tried calling her several times, but each call went straight to voicemail. My mind raced with scenarios, each more unsettling than the last. Finally, the sound of her car pulling into the driveway broke the oppressive silence of the house. My heart pounded as I waited for her to come in, the bouquet of roses now wilting in my anxious grasp. Liz walked in, her expression weary, her smile forced. Something was off. Hey, you're back. I was worried, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Yeah, sorry. Got caught up with Sarah. You know how it is, she replied, avoiding my gaze. I wanted to believe her, to shake off the nagging doubts that had taken root in my mind. But the unease from the night before, coupled with today's events, made it impossible. Liz, is everything okay? You've been distant, I ventured, hoping for some semblance of normalcy in her response. She paused, a flicker of something crossing her face before she masked it with a tired smile. It's nothing, just work stress. Let's not worry about it tonight. But I couldn't let it go. The pieces weren't fitting together, and the more I tried to ignore it, the louder the questions screamed in my head. Our conversation that evening was strained, the air between us thick with unspoken words and growing uncertainties. As we headed to bed, the distance between us felt more profound than just the physical space. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, the shadows playing tricks on my eyes. The woman I loved, the woman I thought I knew, seemed like a stranger lying beside me. That night, sleep was a distant dream. My mind was a whirlpool of doubts, fears, and unanswered questions. Little did I know that this was just the beginning, the first ripple in what would become a tidal wave of revelations that would challenge everything I believed about my life, my love, and myself. The restless night gave way to a dawn that felt more like a continuation of the darkness rather than a new beginning. I dragged myself out of bed, the image of Liz sleeping peacefully next to me contrasting sharply with the turmoil in my mind. I had more questions than answers, and the silence between us was becoming a deafening roar. At work, the surveillance screens blurred before my eyes. Each person walking through the supermarket aisles seemed to carry their own secrets, and I couldn't help but wonder about the unseen dramas in their lives. My own drama was unfolding right before me, yet I felt powerless to stop it. As if on cue, Liz walked into the store. My heart leapt into my throat. Today, she seemed different, more composed, yet there was an edge to her movements. She picked up her usual items, but I noticed her glancing frequently at her phone. My mind raced with possibilities. Was she communicating with someone? An old fear, long buried, began to resurface. Hey, you're zoning out again. Everything all right? Tom's voice brought me back to the present. Yeah, just thinking, I replied, forcing a smile. I watched as Liz made her way through the store, her every move adding to the growing knot of anxiety in my stomach. I wanted to call her, to confront her, but I held back. I needed to be sure before I made any accusations. The day dragged on, and with each passing hour, my resolve strengthened. I had to know the truth, whatever it might be. As I left work, I decided to make a detour before heading home. I stopped by a nearby bar, a place where Liz and I used to go when we were younger. The familiar setting was a stark reminder of happier times. I ordered a drink, my mind racing with the events of the past few days. "Rough day?" the bartender asked, noting my distracted demeanor. "Just thinking about some things," I replied, not wanting to delve into my personal life. I sipped my drink, each swallow a mix of nostalgia and bitterness. The memories of our early days together, once sweet, now had a tinge of doubt. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was missing a crucial piece of the puzzle. After a while, I paid my tab and headed home, my mind a whirlwind of emotions. As I walked in, the house felt emptier than usual. The kids were still at their friend's house, and Liz was nowhere to be seen. I paced the living room, each step echoing my growing frustration. I picked up my phone several times to call her, but hesitated. What would I say? What could I say? Finally, the sound of the front door opening snapped me out of my reverie. Liz walked in, her face a mask of calm that did little to hide the tension in her eyes. "Where have you been?" I asked, my voice betraying a hint of accusation. "Just out, clearing my head," she replied, her tone guarded. I wanted to believe her, to return to the simplicity of our life before all these doubts crept in. But the questions wouldn't let me. "Liz, we need to talk." "I feel like there's something you're not telling me," I said, my voice firm yet pleading. She sighed, a weariness settling over her. "I don't know what you want me to say. I'm just trying to deal with things in my own way." "But why do you have to deal with them alone? Why can't you let me in?" I pressed, my frustration mounting. She looked at me, her eyes a mix of sadness and defiance. "Sometimes it's easier to handle things by myself. I don't want to burden you." Her words stung, and I felt a chasm widening between us. The woman I thought I knew, the woman I loved, seemed to be slipping away from me. We stood there, in the middle of our living room, a couple torn between the love of the past and the uncertainties of the present. The conversation that followed was a dance of words, each of us tiptoeing around the truth, afraid of what we might find. That night, as I lay in bed, the doubts and suspicions swirling in my mind kept sleep at bay. The sound of Liz's breathing next to me was a constant reminder of the distance that had grown between us. I knew then that something had to change. I couldn't continue living in a world of maybes and what-ifs. As the first light of dawn crept through the curtains, I made a decision. I had to find the truth, no matter how painful it might be. The journey ahead was uncertain, but I couldn't live in the shadows of doubt any longer. It was time to step into the light, whatever it might reveal. The next few days were a blur of restless thoughts and sleepless nights. My mind became a battleground of suspicion and confusion. The once comforting routine of work now felt like a chain, each day dragging me further into a mire of doubt. My eyes would unconsciously seek out Liz on the surveillance screens, a habit that had once brought me joy, now only fueled my unease. Then, one ordinary Thursday, the unexpected happened. As I scanned through the screens, I saw Liz walking briskly through the aisles, her demeanor different from the usual. My heart raced as I watched her, a mix of apprehension and desperation to understand clouding my judgment. "Hey, are you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost," Tom's concerned voice broke through my focus. "It's nothing," I muttered, my gaze still fixed on the screen. I watched as Liz picked up a few items, her actions mechanical. But it was her frequent glances at her phone that caught my attention. She seemed anxious, her eyes darting around as if looking for someone or something. My mind raced with questions. Who was she meeting? What was going on? I couldn't contain the turmoil inside me any longer. I had to know. Making up an excuse about feeling unwell, I left work early, a plan forming in my mind. I would follow Liz, confront her, and demand the truth. As I trailed her car from a safe distance, my emotions swung wildly between fear, anger, and sorrow. The journey ended at a quaint little cafe on the outskirts of town. Parking my car a block away, I walked to the cafe, my heart pounding in my chest. Peering through the cafe window, I saw Liz sitting at a table, her face a mixture of anxiety and expectation. She kept glancing at her watch and then towards the entrance. My hands clenched into fists as I fought the urge to barge in and confront her. But I needed to see who she was waiting for. Minutes felt like hours as I waited, my mind conjuring up scenarios of betrayal and deception. Then he walked in, a man I vaguely recognized but couldn't place. He was of average build, with an air of confidence that seemed out of place in the quiet cafe. Their greeting was formal, too formal for my liking. They talked, their conversation intense but hushed. I strained to hear, but their words were lost in the hum of the cafe. I couldn't stand it any longer. I pushed the cafe door open and walked straight to their table, my presence startling them. "Liz, what's going on?" I demanded, my voice a mix of hurt and anger. She looked up at me, her eyes wide with shock. "What are you doing here?" "I followed you." "I had to know," I said, my voice barely a whisper, yet laden with emotion. The man stood up, his expression one of confusion. "Is everything okay here?" I ignored him, my focus solely on Liz. "Who is he? Liz? What are you hiding from me?" Liz's face was a canvas of emotions, guilt, fear, and something else I couldn't quite decipher. She hesitated, then spoke, her voice trembling. "He's just a friend, an old colleague. We were just catching up." Her words did little to quell the storm inside me. Just catching up? Why all the secrecy then? Why meet here, of all places? The man, realizing the situation was more serious than he had thought, excused himself and left, leaving us alone with the weight of the moment. Liz and I sat there, the air between us heavy with unspoken words. The confrontation I had imagined so many times in my mind was nothing like this, raw, painful, and heartbreakingly real. "Liz, I need the truth. Is there someone else?" I asked, the words cutting through me like a knife. She looked at me, tears welling up in her eyes. "No, there's no one else. I swear. I've just been feeling lost lately, unsure about everything." Her words hit me like a wave of cold water. This wasn't just about infidelity or secrets. This was about us, our relationship, our family. We talked for what seemed like hours, our conversation a mix of accusations, explanations, and painful realizations. The more we talked, the more it became clear that our marriage had been drifting for longer than either of us had cared to admit. The drive home was silent, each of us lost in our thoughts. As we walked into the house, the reality of our situation settled in. This was more than just a rough patch. This was a chasm that had been widening with time. That night, as I lay in bed, the events of the day replayed in my mind. The confrontation, the realization, the pain of understanding that the person I loved was as lost as I was. Our marriage, once a source of strength and happiness, now felt like a puzzle with missing pieces. I knew then that the road ahead would be difficult, filled with tough conversations and even tougher decisions. But for the first time in a long time, I felt a glimmer of hope. Confrontation had brought realization, and with it, the first step towards understanding and, perhaps, healing. In the days that followed our confrontation, the house became a silent battlefield, each of us navigating the tension with cautious steps. Our conversations were superficial, skimming the surface of deeper, unspoken truths. The trust that had once been the foundation of our relationship now lay in fragments, a puzzle I wasn't sure could be pieced back together. Liz tried to bridge the gap, her attempts at normalcy stark against the backdrop of our strained relationship. "Would you like some coffee?" she asked one morning, her voice tentative. I nodded, my response just as guarded. The simple act of sharing coffee, once a daily ritual filled with chatter and laughter, now felt like a negotiation in a truce that was yet to be declared. As I sipped the bitter brew, my mind replayed the events of the past weeks. The doubt, the following, the confrontation, it all seemed like a script from a drama I never wanted to star in. Later that week, I decided to visit an old friend, Mark, someone who had known both Liz and me since our early days together. The familiar setting of Mark's garage, cluttered with tools and half-finished projects, was a small comfort. "Man, you look like you've been through the ringer," Mark commented, handing me a beer. I let out a humorless chuckle. "Feels like it too." We talked, or rather, I talked and he listened. I poured out everything, my suspicions, the cafe incident, the uneasy peace at home. Mark listened, his expression a mix of concern and disbelief. "You think she's hiding something more?" he finally asked, leaning back against a workbench. "I don't know, Mark. I don't know what to believe anymore," I admitted, the weight of my uncertainty evident in my voice. He clapped a hand on my shoulder, a silent show of support. "You'll figure it out, man. You always do." Returning home that evening, I found Liz in the kitchen, her back to me as she cooked. The aroma of the food did little to lift the heaviness in the air. "We need to talk," I said, my voice more assertive than I felt. She turned off the stove and faced me, wiping her hands on a towel. "I know we do." I took a deep breath, bracing myself. "I can't keep living like this, Liz. This uncertainty, it's tearing me apart." She nodded, her eyes reflecting a pain that mirrored my own. "I feel it too. I hate what we've become." "Then tell me, please, is there something you're not telling me? Something about us, about you?" I asked, my voice a mix of desperation and frustration. Liz looked down, her hands trembling slightly. "I've been unhappy, lost. I thought I could find my way back on my own, but I've been struggling. Her admission hit me like a wave. Why didn't you tell me? Why shut me out? I didn't want to burden you. I thought I could handle it, she replied, her voice breaking. We stood in the kitchen, the heart of our home, now a witness to the unraveling of our lives. The conversation that followed was raw and emotional, a deluge of pinned-up feelings and unaddressed issues. We talked about everything, our hopes, our fears, our failures. As the night wore on, a realization dawned on me. This wasn't just about broken trust or hidden truths. This was about two people who had lost their way, each caught up in their own battles, forgetting that we were supposed to fight them together. The hours passed, and with each word exchanged, a small part of the wall between us crumbled. But the damage done was not easily repaired. The trust that had been broken would take time, maybe a lifetime, to rebuild. That night, as I lay in bed, Liz's words echoed in my mind. The pain of her struggle, the loneliness of her journey, it was a side of her I had never seen, or perhaps had chosen not to see. I knew then that the road to healing would be long and uncertain. Whether our relationship could withstand the journey was a question that lingered in the silent darkness. But for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt a flicker of hope, a possibility that maybe, just maybe, we could find our way back to each other. As dawn broke, casting a soft light through the curtains, I realized that this was not the end, but perhaps the beginning of a new chapter, one where understanding and healing might pave the way for a future we could both believe in. As dawn broke, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, I found myself at a crossroads. The night had been long, filled with restless thoughts and a heart heavy with sorrow. Liz and I, once inseparable, now lay on the same bed as strangers, divided by a gulf of unsaid words and unshed tears. I rose silently, careful not to wake her, and made my way to the kitchen. The house, once filled with laughter and warmth, now echoed with the silence of our unspoken fears and uncertainties. As I brewed coffee, the events of the past few weeks replayed in my mind. The doubts, the confrontation, the painful realization that our marriage was on the brink of collapse. Sitting at the kitchen table, I gazed out the window, lost in thought. The world outside went about its business, oblivious to the turmoil within me. I realized then that life doesn't pause for heartbreak or wait for one to mend. It moves on, and so must I. The sound of footsteps alerted me to Liz's presence. She walked in, her eyes puffy from crying, her usual grace replaced by a somberness that tugged at my heart. "Good morning," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Morning," I replied, my voice equally subdued. We sat in silence, sipping our coffee, each lost in our thoughts. The air was thick with words we couldn't bring ourselves to say. The distance between us was more than just physical. It was a chasm wrought by broken trust and shattered dreams. Liz broke the silence, her voice trembling. "I think we need to talk about us, about where we go from here." I nodded, knowing that this conversation was inevitable. "Yes, we do." She took a deep breath, steadying herself. "I know I've hurt you, more than I can ever express. And for that, I am truly sorry." Her apology, sincere as it was, did little to ease the pain. The trust we had built over the years had crumbled, leaving behind a void filled with doubt and betrayal. "I appreciate your apology, Liz, but I don't know if it's enough." "The trust is broken," I said, my voice heavy with emotion. "I know, and I understand if you can't forgive me. But I want you to know that I'm willing to do whatever it takes to fix this, to fix us," she replied, her eyes pleading. I looked at her, the woman I had loved and shared my life with, and felt a pang of sorrow for what we had lost. "I don't know if there's anything left to fix, Liz. Too much has happened, too many words left unsaid." Tears streamed down her cheeks, each one a testament to the pain we both felt. "Is there no hope for us? No chance to start anew?" Her question hung in the air, heavy with the weight of our shared past and uncertain future. I knew then that our journey together had reached its end. It was time for a new beginning, not as a couple, but as individuals seeking our own paths. "Liz, I think it's best if we go our separate ways. We need to find ourselves again, away from the shadows of what we used to be," I said, my heart aching with each word. She nodded, a resigned acceptance in her eyes. "I understand. I just wish things could have been different." "So do I replied, a sense of finality settling over me. We spent the rest of the morning discussing practical matters, the house, the kids, our shared assets. It was a conversation devoid of the love and warmth that had once defined us, replaced by a clinical detachment that was necessary yet heartbreaking. As Liz left the room to start packing her things, I sat back in my chair, a deep sense of loss enveloping me. Our marriage had ended, not with a bang, but with a whimper, a slow disintegration of what we had once believed to be unbreakable. But amidst the pain and sorrow, I felt a flicker of hope. A new beginning awaited me, a chance to rediscover who I was before the doubts and fears had clouded my vision. It wouldn't be easy, but I was ready to face the challenge, ready to step into a future filled with possibilities and uncertainties. And so, with a heavy heart but a resilient spirit, I embarked on a new journey, one that would lead me down unknown paths and towards a destiny yet unwritten.